Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring the good news to the poor. He has sent me to comfort the brokenhearted and to proclaim that the captives will be released and the prisoners will be freed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God.
Today is January 24th, and those who know my work, it's 1, 2, 4, so we'll talk about that. But on this awesome day, Andy, Schectman, and I are here together. So, Andy, welcome.
Good to see you both. Thanks for having me back, buddy. I appreciate it. Hope you're doing well. You look good.
I am. Thank you so much. Yeah, exciting. We know January's here, and it just there's a lot to talk about with regards to timing and calendars and precious metals. And the bottom line is, I just want our viewers to know that no currency has ever existed. When I say currency, I mean money system created by man has ever existed forever. Ever. Every currency that's ever been created, any monetary instrument, every one of them have gone to zero, zilch, nada. Okay? The US dollar is no different. Just because we were born into a monetary system that uses the US dollar, we all are accustomed and feel that, hey, this game is gonna go on forever. But it doesn't, because those who study history knows that what Andy and I are going to talk about is the truth. Okay, because the history tells us every single monetary instrument has gone to zero. Okay, and if you don't know history, you don't know finance. And if you know finance, the only currency that's ever existed, or monetary instrument that's ever existed for 5,000 years, is gold and silver. So what is gold and silver? It's flat out insurance policy against everything, particularly the politicians and the guys that make the money. And so, Andy, expand upon all that.
Yeah, well, one of the first books I ever read in this industry was a small book by a man named Dr. Franz Pick. And it stuck to me very, very right away that all currencies inherently are meant to die, that they all return to their intrinsic value of zero. And this is the reason why you see politicians throughout time do all they can to break the link between gold, which is a tether, if you will, to fiscal sanity and truth, and break that so that they can do what all politicians have done since the beginning of time and choose inflation over austerity. And so this is something that is a trend that will continue forever. And this is why I believe when we see some sort of a reset, some sort of a new system, that it must be pegged to something like gold in order to give it legitimacy. If you don't, then we will, like if you don't know history, I would add you're doomed to repeat its mistakes. And that's exactly what we've seen over and over. I mean, for example, if you look at a gold or a silver coin, or even a quarter or a dime in your pocket, you'll notice there are ridges along the edges of the coins. Those were put on there because all the way back in Roman times, when they were running out of money, they've overextended themselves, kind of like we have, and they were fighting wars all around the world to maintain their empire. And they were running out of money, so they would trim little bits around the edges of the coins. And if you do that enough, you have a big stash of trimmings that you can make into more coins. And they were paying their soldiers, in essence, counterfeiting them, paying them, and that's another way of inflation. They were paying them less gold and silver and not being honest about it. Well, it kind of similar to the way things are today when we talk about the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the way that they gauge inflation, and the way that we're told that the CPI is a certain number when we know it's not, and how they got rid of M3, which was the broadest measure of the money supply, calling it archaic. And now we can't see how much money is in the system as we once were able to. But the bottom line is that, yeah, gold and silver are wealth that have outlived 2 world wars and German hyperinflation and the Great Depression and everything. It is wealth. And I think that in order to have a system of money that will be trusted, it must be pegged to something. So the fact that gold was reclassified the world's only other tier 1 asset, the fact that the central banks have bought more in 2022 and 2023 than ever before, 2 record years in a row, tells me that not only are they the wealthiest traders in the world, they're the most well-informed. They know the playbook. And if indeed we go to a new system, if we have some sort of a reset for whatever that the impetus is to get us there, I think in order to get anyone to trust a system that has lost trust, and rightfully so, it will need to be pegged to something like gold, which is immutable. And we can debate how that would happen, and I have ideas on how it would. But the bottom line is, short of that, we have the same problem that we've seen going all the way back to Roman times, where governments will inflate and print or debase the coins by cutting the rims in order to achieve their goals of deficit spending. And our government is addicted to spending. That's for darn sure.
Well, in addition to what they would do is they would take the coin, melt it down, and then start adding copper into it. And so the gold coin went from 100% to like 90%, then 80%. So they kept adding copper to it. But this is the cool part. Okay, so that's one aspect of how they would also do it. And then the other part of this would be too, right? Every time a monetary system has ever failed in human history, what does it always revert back to? It always goes back to gold and silver. See, so every time a system fails, a financial system created by man fails, it always reverts back to gold. Okay. It's always the go-to. The go-to is gold and silver. And so so that's why if you don't understand history tells us very clearly, every time an empire or a financial system breaks and fails, it always reverts back to gold and silver as the staple, the standard, as the rock to stand on, in a way. Okay. And so that's the ultimate thing. That's why you see, even to this day, Roman coins, they still have value today because they're gold, right? So, or silver. So any coinage from thousands of years even has huge value still today, because now you got the numismatic side of it too. But the bottom line is that coin from Rome or wherever hundreds, thousands of years ago still has value today. Think about that. It still has value today because it's gold.
You could look at this coin right here from 1904, and that's a $20 gold coin, basically an ounce of gold. Now, you could have exchanged that for one of these right here, which is a $20 gold certificate. And it's interesting, instead of saying "In God We Trust" on the bottom, it says "Payable to the bearer on demand in gold coin." But if your grandfather, that's a $10. So it's
actually said. So these are the things that used to use. It says gold certificate. So these were redeemable at the bank
for
actual gold.
For this $10 gold coin, they were the same thing.
Put that up again. Actually, people can see it. So you could take this and redeem it for gold. You see where it says gold certificate? So I actually ordered this off eBay. It's like a couple $100 to pay for it. But you could actually redeem this and get gold for it.
Well, look what it says under look what it says about under $10, payable in demand in gold coin. And so imagine your grandfather left you 2 boxes, one with $10,000 worth of these, so 1,000 of them, or $10,000 worth of those, 1,000 of those bills. So, but let's just pretend it's $10. So, that $10,000, sure, it's great, but this is worth $1 million having the same amount. And that's because the value of the gold within the coin maintained its purchasing power. And if you go back and look at what $10,000 was worth back then, I bet it's pretty damn close to $1 million. So the point of it is that, the currency has done exactly what you said. It is on its way down to zero. And from back then, it's worth about 10 cents or less on the dollar, if that, maybe much less than that. And gold has retained its value. And you can find examples of that throughout all of history.
Let's say this, on the way, sorry to interrupt, but on the way down to zero, you have the choir preaching, "Don't worry, it's all good." And so the band's playing, right? So like on the Titanic, it's sinking, but the band's still playing. This is what's going on, okay? The money system's sinking, but the band is playing. It's all good. Don't you worry about a thing, right? This is what's going on right now because they control the media. So they're pushing out a narrative, which is a complete and utter lie. The financial system is a complete and utter fraud, but they will never attest to that. Why? Because they use it to control and enslave us. And that's the money system, right? And the moment that Nixon took us off the gold standard, you know this as well as I do. You talk about how it took 12 days to count to 1 million then, right? And that's the money system was probably barely $1 billion in the 70s, right? And now we're in the quadrillions, which is 1,000 trillion, which as for a fact, it takes 31 million years to count to without sleeping.
31,688 years to count to 1 trillion. That's a trillion seconds. I mean, so the numbers are so big, people don't quite realize it. And this is a country that's issuing $1 trillion worth of debt every quarter this year and has $10 trillion worth of bonds that are coming due this year. How the heck do you pay for that other than by borrowing more money? And you're right. And if it's interesting, the St. Louis Fed has all sorts of charts that you can design with their information. If you look at the price of food as an example, from prior to and after 1971, it looks like a hockey stick. Is that a correlation? I wonder why the cost of living went up so much after 1971, why we've seen so much inflation and distortion in asset prices. It's exactly why, where gold kept prices stable, and the taking of gold out of the money has created nothing but inflation and much, much, much higher prices, where $10,000 in 1971 was still a lot of money. What's it worth today? And it's continuing. Certainly, it's a trend that is probably accelerating right now more than anything. And I would expect to see much more inflation and much higher prices as we get closer and closer to the end of the system, as the dollar becomes worth less and less and less, until that final moment when no one wants it anymore and it reverts to its intrinsic value of zero. And we're not there yet, but certainly by looking at where we are from where we began, we're pretty darn close.
There was a prophecy, I'm not sure you know, but it was a prophecy about a $50 bill. And so the $50 bill represents 50-year Jubilee. Okay, so which we're in right now. So this is the 50-year Jubilee. And then the dollar lost a third of its value in the prophecy. Then later on, years later, it loses another third of its value. And then after that, it loses all of its value.
Yeah, so it makes sense. It makes sense. And that's you're talking at that rate, it's like the fourth turning. You're getting to a point where all of the things that the country used to stand for and the currency used to stand for is forgotten. And you have new generations that are moving in a different direction and thinking that you can become a modern monetary theorist and just print and destroy the value of your currency without repercussion. But that's beginning to change. And, it's something that I don't think we've even begun to see what it looks like at the end game when there are people out there talking about something called Operation Sandman, where you have 150 plus countries have already privately agreed to dump U.S. treasuries and dollars in unison at once. Now, I don't know when that is, but that's how fast it can go from what value it has now to losing the majority, if not all of its value, in terms of just no one wanting to take it any longer for commodities or for goods or services. So, we're not there yet, but I mean, if you look at it from a standpoint of how far it's fallen, you would say we're already there. I mean, it's lost 99% of its value. Just look at the value that it's lost since 1971 when we depegged it from gold, and it's tremendous. So, yeah, all of these things are playing out, and you're right, the band continues to play, and a lot of the reasons are because the information we get either from the media or even from the Bureau of Labor Statistics is a lie. As an example, the CPI, which is a gauge of inflation, and it's actually should be the other way around. I mean, rising prices are a symptom of inflation. Inflation is an increase in the money supply. So they get rid of M3 so you can't see it. They strip out food, energy, and housing out of the CPI so you can't really get it. And if you look at the real CPI numbers, the way they used to be calculated, like from John Williams of Shadow Stats, we're between 9 and 11%, not the 3 and 4 they're telling you. And when you talk about the mandate of the Fed, two things. It is to try and strive for full employment and for price stability, i.e. inflation. Well, even the unemployment numbers that Biden was touting as being so amazing, well, they quietly, after the fact, now remember, this is how the Fed is supposed to gauge their policy. We just get a report last week saying, oh, sorry, we actually overestimated by 440,000 jobs in 2023, or 40% of the jobs we said were created never were. So we are being lied to and not told the real information to understand where we are in this cycle. And you're right, as the boat is taking on water, the band is still playing, people are still drinking and hobnobbing, and you can't get out of the way of what you don't see coming, even if the boat is sinking and you don't notice it. And that's the pity of all of this, is that guys like you and I who scream this is happening really aren't being noticed by the mainstream. And it will take something probably pretty awful for people to wake up and understand what gold and silver represent in a world of make-believe. Gold and silver are sanity and they are assets that carry no counterparty liability. And the dollar is an asset that has tremendous counterparty liability. And we are a country that is insolvent and broke and losing credibility fast. So I would rather bet, in this case, on 5,000-year-old history rather than, the promises of a bankrupt government who really isn't looking out for the value of the dollar or anything. But, when you talk about, we've printed trillions of dollars and more in the last 4 years than in the history of the country preceding it. And we've raised the debt ceiling 79 times as well. And when you talk about the Bureau of Labor Statistics not being honest and all of this stuff that has accommodated 40 years of our inflationary agenda, to expect them to fight inflation right now and turn around and fix this is just a joke. I mean, they've done everything they can to promote inflation behind the scenes, and now to think they're going to get tough on it is a pipe dream.
Are you saying that they would lie to us?
Yes, I know, as controversial as that is, I am saying that. And they're talking about ending quantitative tightening this year, Bo, despite a balance sheet that's still over $7.6 trillion. That's 85% of its peak level over the last 15 years after the great financial crisis. They've done nothing to drain off their balance sheet. And so, yeah, they will lie to us. And they know that if they raise rates high enough, the whole system breaks. So while they would probably like to get rid of inflation, I think they're choosing.
So the question I have to you is imagine if we have a standard which is backed by gold. This would not be a part of the Federal Reserve because they don't want us. They want their money to be that's their money is paper, and that's what they're trying to create. Central bank digital currency, that's their money. On the other side of it, if we had a financial system that's backed by gold, that creates a system that's outside of the Federal Reserve, right?
Part of me feels like they've tried to solve that problem. And I don't know if I'm right on this or not. You have Kristalina Georgieva, the head of the International Monetary Fund, who said a central bank digital currency not pegged to something is fiat. What did the Bank of International Settlements reclassify gold to other than the world's only other tier 1 reserve asset? And so when you talk about how they could do it, have their cake and eat it too, the only way I could see them doing it would be to have a marriage of blockchain and gold, where they only peg 5 or 10% of gold or of every currency unit to gold at a much higher price. Number one, gold would have to be much higher. Number two, they peg a very small portion of it. Even if only 5% or 10% is tethered, you get to that point where you have to stop printing. And so giving the Federal Reserve 95% monetary wiggle room, if you will, and the blockchain and having it audited appropriately would be the only way that I could see it being done, and audited by international independent auditors. Because what is a blockchain other than a ledger? And if it is not a decentralized ledger, the people running the ledger can still mess with it. So while it's not a perfect system, there is no question that I think gold has to be a part of it. How they do it and what it looks like is a challenge, because redeemable currencies are redeemed. President de Gaulle from France proved that, Gresham's law. And so I just think that you're right. It does have to have a pegging to it. How they play it out. Will the Fed be involved, or is the Fed, exposed for the ills that they have created and gotten rid of? I don't know, but I do agree with you on your premise that it has to be tied to gold.
Yeah, and the reason I'm laughing is because it's funny when you say they will never. This is my take on it. They will never do anything honest, because that's where we're at right now. So they're not gonna. They lie about everything. The financial system, they've created trillions of dollars, quadrillions now, and they basically just keep having people go to work. When they click a button, create monies out of thin air. The whole thing is an absolute fraud right now. And before it wasn't so obvious, maybe 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, but it's at a point right now where, they're not even scared. They say stuff on mainstream media they know is a lie. They get caught in lies all the time. They never renounce anything. It's at a point now where it's so obvious that there's so many lies And there's no way that they will ever do anything for our benefit. Why? Because when you understand scriptures of, the Bible is really clear. The Revelation says Babylon, right? What's Babylon? It's a control system. And so for them to actually do something in our favor means that they're working for humanity. But they don't want to work for humanity because they want to, it's like the elite and us, right? That's how it's set up. It's they, them, and then us.
So are you saying they're lying to us, Bo?
Right back at me. Yeah. I love it. But it's like the thing. It's like everything's an absolute lie. And that's why like I love speaking with you, because you know the mechanics of it. You know the numbers. And no matter how you do the numbers, they don't add up anymore. Not only they don't add up anymore, we don't know the numbers anymore. Even from shadow stats, he'll give you some. He does probably the best job in doing the numbers, but even he's got to guess to a degree because they don't expose the numbers anymore. Nothing's fully revealed anymore. We just don't know what the truth is, because the truth is they've lied so much. And once you the rules about lying is, when you start a lie, you just got to keep lying, and you can't stop lying, because if you stop lying, you expose the truth. So this has just been, this is generations of lies already, and this comes back to the point at the start of the conversation. Every money that they create, ultimately, before an empire falls, they hyperinflate the money. That's what they're doing right now. Yeah. We're watching, you said the hockey stick. That's what we're watching. We're watching the hockey stick moment. The money's it's going straight vertical right now. They're just creating it like crazy. Why? Because they can. They're in charge. It's their money, and they can do whatever they want, and no one's there to stop them. See, that's the thing. No one's there to stop them. Why? Because they all have, you go to college, and all the fraternities, you all have a secret handshake. See, that's what's going on. They all have secret handshakes. They're all in bed together, and they don't care about us. They want to control us. That's the bottom line. And so, and you actually get it because you know the numbers. You know how the numbers matter, how you do the math. It's ridiculous at this point. It's complete and utter ridiculousness of the money of where we're at right now. Because even the homes in the 70s, those that still own that home in the 70s, hey, your home's maybe worth, it was $30,000 then, it's maybe $500,000, maybe $1 million now. Your home, if you haven't upgraded it, it's 50 years old. Everything's decrepit in there. It needs to be but the home's worth $1 million. How does something go up in value like that? It just doesn't make sense. And that's why gold and silver is nothing but an honest ledger of money.
Yeah, you're right. And it's not that these asset prices go up in value. It's that the dollar that we measure it against go down in value. And that's what gold did. It kept things relative. And then you didn't have the constant debasement of, why I never understood why the Fed, I'm sorry, I'm trying to avoid the sunlight coming in the corner up there. Got these curved windows, and I have no blinds up in the top curve. So anyways, I never understood why the Fed mandate was for 2% inflation. I mean, negative 2% would be better, because the lower the level of inflation, the better the standard of living. And so that's exactly what they have chosen to fit this agenda of in essence being addicted to spending. And with the deadlocked governments that we've seen for quite some time now, it's impossible to reduce expenditures, and no one wants to be the one that stops the spending. And it's really, really crazy as far as I'm concerned. And you got the Congressional Budget Office, Bo, that just came out and said by 2031, in just over 7 years, under 7 years, just under 7 years, that 100% of all of the tax receipts will go to pay just the mandatory entitlement spendings and the interest on the debt. And the mandatory entitlement spending, things like Social Security, which is $77 trillion in the hole. And we are told that by 2033, it will be bankrupt. So ask yourself, how can this country retain its dominance financially and militarily when in 7 years, 100% of discretionary spending, which includes military, will need to be borrowed? And that doesn't include the 10 million people who've entered this country illegally, who have massive expenses in healthcare and housing and schooling. Who's going to pay for that? So we are a broken, insolvent country, and we are reaching the tip of that hockey stick. So we're not there yet, but it's the fact that the band is playing, Bo. It's the fact that the music's still going on, and that most of the country is enjoying the music and the cocktails. when the rest of us are screaming from the life raft, get in, and no one is listening, that this is going to become a much bigger problem, because when this blows off and does so very quickly, and an event happens that really disables or hurts the dollar, yeah, there'll be a lot of people that will be really, unfortunately, horribly affected.
Well, let's talk about the event, right? It's pretty obvious what's going on right now. You and I are the two people, for the past 2, 3 years now, have been talking about the BRICS. And so we're at a point now where initially there was a petrodollar contract with Kissinger, but we now know as of January 1, the half of the petro was Saudis' dollar contract. Well, the Saudis are now a part of the BRICS. And the BRICS comprise, I think, from what I understand, about 70% of the world population. So think about this as an event. If the dollar is dethroned as the world's reserve currency, talk about how that will change the world, particularly because right now they send the world reserve currency and they've used it to fund all the wars. So how does that change if now we're all, we're globally, there's war, say there's wars going on, but no country wants our dollar?
Well, I'll answer that, and I'll get to the what happens if moment, but let's delineate the difference between reserve and settlement. So the settlement process or portion is that, yes, through the petrodollar agreement, oil and energy is denominated globally in US dollars. And so that's what's happened for 50 years. The reserve portion is where they take those proceeds and they reinvest them in our US Treasury market. Now, you can look at gold since the beginning of 2000 has appreciated by 7.8% per year annually. The S&P 500 by 7%, and the bond market by way less. So gold has acted like a bond in essence, in the respect that it has retained purchasing power and actually grown modestly year over year without the counterparty risk, without the interest rate or inflation risk that the treasuries have. And if you look at what's happened over the last couple of years, last year was the first year in 45 years that the 10-year treasury had greater volatility than gold. And I would argue that the reserve status, the bond portion of this deal is, these countries are selling US treasuries, and with the proceeds, move over here, and with the proceeds, they are buying, I should put on sunglasses for goodness sake. And with the proceeds, they're buying gold, which is acting very much like a bond. Now, the settlement currency, you can talk about the petro settlement. 20% of the world's oil last year was settled in currencies other than US dollars. And as an example, China had bought 1.39 million barrels of oil every day in December 2023 and 760,000 barrels of oil on average every day in 2023. That was in December, the 1.39 million. But over the course of the year, over 760,000 barrels of oil a day, none of it settling in dollars, trading with Russia and Saudi Arabia and exchanging for bilaterally other currencies, or these countries selling for yuan and then immediately taking the yuan and exchanging it on the Shanghai Gold Exchange for gold. So we are beginning to see this happen little by little by little. United Arab Emirates, makes an announcement that they're not going to take oil for dollars anymore 3 days before they have 200 countries represented at the United Nations Summit a few weeks ago in Dubai, presided over by the chief of the state-owned United Arab Emirates oil company. And so when you talk about this happening little by little by little, and look, United Arab Emirates was admitted into BRICS alongside Saudi Arabia. They're the 7th largest producer of oil in the world. They're an OPEC country. It's not something to be taken lightly. But if you realize that the synthetic demand for dollars has been created by the fact that every country needs to stockpile them to buy oil, if they no longer have that demand or need to stockpile dollars, they will dump them. They will buy anything they can, commodities or not, that is or other currencies, in order to buy oil with those, or whatever it may be. Those dollars will get dumped. There will be no demand for them. They will flood back home to the issuer, that is us, which will create hyperinflation. And in that hyperinflationary event, the only way to offset it without completely collapsing everything is to have interest rates go higher to compensate for the loss of purchasing power. In other words, you can't have 20% inflation and 5% interest. But what happens in that moment? Well, the dollar's dead because everyone's dumping it. Stocks, bonds, and real estate are all inversely correlated to a massive stock in interest rates, and so is the banking system. It is the Great Reset. As dramatic as that sounds, it's what it is. And when you realize that the bonds are already witnessing, very long tails on the 10 and the 30-year auctions, that they don't have the demand they once did, the Fed is going to have to buy them, monetizing the debt, creating hyperinflation. So the bottom line is all roads lead to the same place: much higher inflation, much higher interest rates, and ultimately a resetting of the system. The privilege that we have enjoyed for 50 years of being the petrodollar is coming to an end. And when you see the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia say publicly not too long ago that China is our most important trading partner in oil this year and for the next 50, well, think about that. You talk about the Jubilee and you talk about 50 years where it's been 50 years since we signed the petrodollar. He chose those words very carefully. And if every country in the world has created the demand for the dollar by needing to stockpile them to buy energy, if that is no longer the case, for those of you who have seen the movie Trading Places, the very last scene of it with Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy, where the Duke brothers are saying, "Sell, Mortimer, sell," as they're watching their empire evaporate because they're on the wrong side of that trade. That's the kind of environment that you would see. Now, this is why I like the term logarithmic decay. Little by little by little by little by little by little by little, and bang, all at once. Now, where are we on that trend? I mean, are we up here still? But you can see it's sloping. It's sloping. It's like you're on the Niagara River 300, 400 years ago. You don't know what's down on the other side. You hear it. You can hear it in the horizon. It's louder and louder. You're going faster and faster. And then bang, where are we? I don't know. But that to me is what it would look like. It would be something that would be disastrous. So you don't have to issue a common reserve currency where you have a vibrant bond market that we have set up that would take a long time. By the way, the BRICS nations are issuing like $48 billion in BRICS bonds that called like the Maharaja bond that only will be purchased right now. Then this is happening much faster than I thought in local currencies. You can't buy them in dollars. They just issued them 48 billion in new BRICS bonds. So they are building a bond market. But if you chip away persistently at the settlement status of the dollar for all of these trades that have settled in dollars in oil and energy and whatnot, you undermine very quickly the reserve status. And that's why they're buying gold and selling their treasuries. They do things very thought out, very plotted, very, very, regimented. And I think that ultimately doesn't play out well for the future of the dollar. And like the milkshake theory, Brent Johnson, smart guy, and like the dollar bulls out there, they're right. The dollar still is king until it's not. And the Wizard of Oz was still the wizard until they went in there and peeked around the corner and pulled back the curtain. Oh, well, you're really not a wizard. You're just a little old frail man who shouldn't be known as a wizard. Well, you could draw parallels into where we are at this point, and I would say Dorothy and the Tin Man and the Scarecrow. Well, they're inside the Palace of Oz. They haven't got to the wizard yet, but they're getting there, and that's what you could see with this coalition of countries joining together and all the bilateral moves they're making and the statements by countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia and Iran, who have all said no more dollars for oil. So little by little by little by little, the chipping away at the giant tree of a hegemony of the dollar, it is happening. And, the dollar is still supreme, but the hegemony is lost as far as I'm concerned. And it's just a matter of what it takes to push it over the falls. Yeah. And I guess it'll be fun to talk with you over the coming months to see how that happens in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll say this, you say being on the wrong side of the trade, right? Explain, as I'm reading your shirt, triple digit silver, right? Just, it's kind of a fun comment because we've never seen triple digit silver. Why? Because if we saw triple digit silver, the banking system would have blown up. Okay. Explain just in closing here, being on the wrong side of the trade, on silver shorts. Okay. The banks have been shorting silver for generations. Why? Because they can create paper contracts to short the price of silver. But now we got to layer in a couple levels here. The BRICS attacked the US dollar. We get a flood, like you said, of money back into the United States because the world, other countries are dumping the US dollar. Thus, we got a mass, the flood of all floods of the US dollar back straight back into the United States. It causes sudden interest rates to go double digit on the so basically blows up the real estate markets. But before all that happens, we're going to have silver is going to go triple digit very quickly. Why would that happen? Because what they do is they have what's called derivative and they have contracts and explain contracts. And if silver went up, because I believe there's stops on the market, they have $3 stops. So if it goes up $3, they can stop the market. But if they can't stop it, it goes another $3. And so explain to, if silver went up $10 in a single day, what that would do to the banking system in terms of all the short positions they've got.
Yeah, it would kill them. I mean, these short positions would be squashed and they'd be forced to cover, which could immediately put these companies out of business. That's what happened to Bear Stearns. And if you listen to the Chris Marcus Arcadia Economics interview with Bart Chilton before he died, he admitted all of this, and he died about a week later. He admitted all of it, that Bear Stearns went out of business because silver went from 12 to 21 and JP Morgan inherited the position and they were above position limits, promised to pare them down and in a time frame, and Bart Chilton was the head of the CFTC at the end of that time frame, went into his superior's office and said, not only has JP Morgan not pared it down, they've increased it, they need to be prosecuted. And he was told to back down. It was a political decision. And he died a week later. And when you talk about these short positions, they're extraordinary. And you have a bank like Bank of America that is short 1 billion ounces of silver. Now, why in the heck would they ever do that? And I have an answer to that, but why would they ever do that? It makes no sense at all. The largest concentrated short position in any commodity traded on the COMEX. And it's interesting to note that over the last 2.5 years, 350 million ounces of silver have slowly bled off of COMEX. And if you look at a country like India, they've imported 400 million over the last 2 years. Do you think some of that COMEX silver belongs to India now? I sure do. When you talk about this massive rise in what's called exchange for physical, they're taking these futures contracts and exchanging them for physical in London, which then can be delivered to China. And right now in Shanghai, right now today, the price of silver is $2.90 higher an ounce in Shanghai than it is on COMEX or the LBMA. The prices are too low. So they're arbitraging. They're buying it here and taking delivery of it over there for 15% less than they can buy it there. But these positions right now, to your point, if you look at silver, it is 1,656% rehypothecated in the contracts. In other words, there's 1,656% more contracts issued than there are bars backing it. Or another way of saying that, if everyone stood for delivery, basically 1 out of 17 would get their silver and the other would get paper or cash settled. It enables them to create distortions, or where the price is created by the gambling on the exchange rather than by the commodity itself. And it's creating a massive leverage position where if you go short, your potential loss is unlimited. And so this is very quickly, if all of a sudden there is a massive rush to accumulate silver, it would put out of business these hedge funds with...
I'm sorry, I want to interrupt for a second, but you said something very important. If you're short, the potential loss is unlimited. Explain that versus being long, because explain the difference between, from $23 silver down to zero versus $23 up to infinity. So explain that so people understand
that means if you buy it at $23 and you're long, your loss potentially, if it goes to zero, which it never would, but is $23. If you sell it short, when you sell something short, if it's naked, if it's not covered, all right, a covered short would be, I have an ounce in my warehouse, I sell an ounce on paper so I can give the ounce to cover. But if it's a naked short, it's a speculation, it's a gamble.
And that's what the banks do. Continue.
Yeah, and if you look at the size of these positions, they're extraordinarily large. So you sell short into the market, you sell paper that you don't have, but it's the same effect in essence, only with leverage, but you have an obligation to pay that silver back at some point. So if you sell short with the anticipation of buying it back at a lower level and paying back your debt, but it goes against you and keeps going higher and higher and higher and higher and higher and higher, the losses keep on going and the higher it goes. And so it has the potential to put companies completely and totally out of business. And maybe that's why you've seen such massive deliveries. We saw the largest one-day delivery off the Shanghai Exchange last week. Massive. We're seeing tons of gold and silver come off of COMEX. And I know you asked me about silver, but in gold, one day last week, 877,000 ounces were delivered off of COMEX. I've never seen that before. 40 million ounces of gold taken off COMEX in the last 3 years. They're doing it methodically, slowly. They're bleeding dry the exchanges to where the exchanges have, in my opinion, at some point will be rendered as a scam. And you will see the price setting mechanism move to a country like Dubai or to United Arab Emirates or to Shanghai Gold Exchange, where they not only accumulate all the metals, but value it properly. And today, like I said, silver is $25.34 an ounce there earlier today versus $22.44 on COMEX. There's a problem there. That's arbitrage. And any of these traders who have the ability to buy stuff here and sell it there for that kind of a spread, they're going to do it. And yes, they'll get rich real quick, make a lot of money, but at the expense of what? And it's happening. And so I think that the people who are accumulating all of this understand where this ultimately plays out. And that's why you're seeing the draining of the exchanges and doing it in a very methodical, slow fashion, not letting the world talk about it, doing it slowly, because rising gold and silver signal frailty in the bond market, in the dollar system itself. And that's why the big money likes to keep it down. But I do want to make one last comment. I do got to run here pretty quick, but I talk a lot about the military aspect of silver and how it's not listed in the Silver Institute supply demand numbers. And the amount of silver that is used in military applications is extraordinary. And 2 years ago, speaking at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, where I just was this last week, I made that statement, and a gentleman came up to me and he said, listen, I work for the Department of Defense, and what I'm going to tell you is declassified, so don't worry. But he's like, that was my baby. I helped develop the Patriot missile and Tomahawk missile program, and this is what I do. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to look into it. And we talked for a couple hours. And I just saw him the other day in Vancouver, and he came back with all sorts of pictures in his hand to show me, to prove that he was the one who developed it. And they had it on this moving track under the water in California, about 50 feet below the water surface. And he said, our biggest struggle was having it shoot vertically, because when it's horizontal, it knows what's up and what's down. But this way, it took a while for it to figure out. And this and that. So I want to tell you, you were right, by the way. There's 15 to 16 kilograms in the tip of a Tomahawk cruise missile. That's just one form of sophisticated weaponry. You got a gazillion forms of it. So when you talk about why would the banks do this, why would Bart Chilton be told to back down? It was a political decision. Why is it so counterintuitive? The military-industrial complex is fighting wars and has been for the last 50 years all over the world. And if not directly being involved, they supply munitions. The need for silver in these high-tech weaponry systems is extraordinary. Yet the Silver Institute, which cites the supply-demand fundamentals showing we have a 2.5 million ounce shortfall 2 years in a row, neglects to put military in there.
And back to history, right? The nuclear bomb would never have been built, ever, without silver.
The Manhattan Project, that's right.
That's right.
So That's one of the things that people need to think about, that all of the things that my world and your world have collided in many ways, the things that I talk about and the things that you talk about, which makes it even that much more eerie. And so, look, I think it's just a matter of time before these things play out. And the counterintuitive nature, when everyone makes you second guess yourself, including yourself, because the prices aren't moving the way that they are supposed to do, is all part of the design. If you want to suppress interest in this asset, which is completely and totally strategic, not just industrial, you want to convince people it's industrial and its role as a monetary or asset is from days gone by. But that's not the case. And you can see that by the acquisition and the draining of the exchanges by the most sophisticated and well-informed investors in the world. So it's a matter of time before the switch is flipped. And it'll happen on a Monday morning. It will happen in one part of the world on Sunday night. Monday morning, we'll wake up to that market with the switch flipped. and the market shut down for 3 hours and this, but you can only suppress a market or push a market in the direction that it is going for an extended period of time, or manipulate by pushing in the direction that it is going for an extended period of time. And if the rest of the world is trying to accumulate it while you hold down the price, well, China says, I'll tell you what, then we'll bump up the price by $2.50 to start, see how much we get. Maybe we'll do it to $5 next month, see how much we can get. How about $10 higher? Any takers? And that's what will happen, is that very quickly the COMEX and its rehypothecation will be exposed as being fraudulent, as it should be.
And that's also just from a physical world perspective. Now, I also look from a biblical perspective. Imagine an intervention, Leviticus, right? Thou shalt consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land. That is God intervening and stopping them. Why? Because they will never stop. And I think we can agree on this. They will never stop doing what they're doing if they can, because they want to keep this game going on forever.
And that's the operative phrase, if they can, and maybe they can, maybe they can't. I think logic is not on their side, nor is this coalition of the world's population that sees this as a once in a lifetime chance to make this move. But this is a 500-year history of the West dominating the rest of the world. They're going to do it the right way, methodically and plotted and thought out before they do make that very provocative decision.
Right. And, we've got all the stars lined up. Right now, we've got the BRICS. That's all lined up. Okay. So we'll see how that plays out. But I'm telling you, we're at a critical time point here. We've got, the BRICS are lining up with a 50-year Jubilee cycle. So we're sitting on that right here, right now. How it all goes down, God knows. I don't know, but I know we're sitting on something huge right now. I love you that you wore that shirt today, triple-digit silver, because there is your short squeeze of all short squeezes. It was fun to watch, some of the short squeezes we've seen in history. Okay. When silver blows vertical, it will be the short squeeze of short squeezes the world has ever seen. It will take down institutions. It will blow up banks. These people, they're so short precious metals that if they lose control of the silver gold market, particularly silver, forget about it. And they will do anything to never let this happen. So it's really exciting to be sitting here, positioned with, I know you've got precious metals. I know I got precious metals. So you and I sleep really well. And, and I really enjoyed speaking with you because you got all the numbers and it's nice to talk with you.
You know what? I promise, as long as you'll have me, I'll ride shotgun with you here and we'll do the play-by-play as it unfolds. I have a feeling that our conversations will become more timely, more important, and as the Chinese curse says, more interesting. May you live in interesting times. Bo, in all my life, as an adult, as a father, I've never been more concerned about what's coming. And to think that we come to these places in life, you don't have to be overly religious to believe that there isn't something bigger at play here. And that's what has intrigued me about the conversion of the numbers and the logic and the mathematics and the scripture and the way that they all converge. So please have me back. I'm always happy to do so. And of course, I wish you and everyone else out there a good evening and a good afternoon. And
how can people find you?
They can send us an email at info@milesfranklin.com for the most competitive price list that we don't publish on our website, and questions that anyone has related to anything we've spoken about here, or about anything related to economics or precious metals, we're happy to answer. And 14 brokers that are all very, very, very smart. They're not order takers. They will answer your questions in a way that is very similar to what you and I are talking about here. So I
Awesome.
appreciate it, Bo, a lot. I really do, and I can't wait to come back because I think there's going to be a lot to talk about as this year rolls on. Remember, we got the big BRICS meeting in October with up to 200 meetings in Russia.
I think we got a lot more before October. So
yes.
I got to jump on other podcasts as we were too. So thank you, Andy. We'll chat soon. God bless you.
God bless.